Okay, we're back for the second recording of the book Primitive Mythology by Joseph Campbell. There's the book. You want to pick it up and follow along. So I'm going to just go through the table of contents at its high level so you know what's coming. So we did the foreword on the completion of the Masks of God, and the next section will be the prologue, called Toward a Natural History of the Gods and Heroes. And then we have 4 parts. The first part is the psychology of myth, which covers, has an introduction, which covers the lesson of the mask. Chapter 1, the enigma of the inherited image, and Chapter 2, the imprints of experience. Part 2 covers the mythology of the primitive planters. Chapter 3, the culture province of the high civilizations. The province of the immolated kings, Chapter 4. Chapter 5, the ritual of death. And then Part 3, the mythology of the primitive hunters. Chapter 6 on shamanism. Chapter 7, the animal master. And Chapter 8, the Paleolithic caves. And then finally, Part 4, the archaeology of myth, which consists of Chapter 9, mythological thresholds of the Paleolithic. Chapter 10, mythological thresholds of the Neolithic, and then the conclusion, the functioning of myth. There's a page that describes the illustrations. There's about 15 illustrations throughout the book, and as we get there, I will show them on the camera. And then we begin with the prologue. Prologue. Toward a Natural History of the Gods and Heroes. 1. The Lineaments of a New Science. The comparative study of the mythologies of the world compels us to view the cultural history of mankind as a unit, for we find that such themes as the fire theft, deluge, land of the dead, virgin birth, and resurrected hero have a worldwide distribution, appearing everywhere in new combinations while remaining, like the elements of a kaleidoscope, only a few and always the same. Furthermore, whereas in tales told for entertainment such mythical themes are taken lightly, in a spirit obviously of play, they appear also in religious contexts, where they are accepted not only as factually true, but even as revelations of the verities to which the whole culture is a living witness, and from which it derives both its spiritual authority and its temporal power. No human society has yet been found in which such mythological motifs have not been rehearsed in liturgies, interpreted by seers, poets, theologians, or philosophers, presented in art, magnified in song, and ecstatically experienced in life-empowering visions. Indeed, the chronicle of our species, from its earliest page, has been not simply an account of the progress of man the toolmaker, but more tragically, a history of the pouring of blazing visions into the minds of seers and the efforts of earthly communities to incarnate unearthly covenants. Every people has received its own seal and sign of supernatural designation, communicated to its heroes and daily proved in the lives and experience of its folk. And though many who bow with closed eyes in the sanctuaries of their own tradition rationally scrutinize and disqualify the sacraments of others, an honest comparison immediately reveals that all have been built from one fund of mythological motifs, variously selected, organized, interpreted, and ritualized according to local need, but revered by every people on earth. A fascinating psychological as well as historical problem is thus presented. Man apparently cannot maintain himself in the universe without belief in some arrangement of the general inheritance of myth. In fact, the fullness of his life would even seem to stand in a direct ratio to the depth and range not of his rational thought but of his local mythology. Whence the force of these unsubstantial themes, by which they are empowered to galvanize populations, creating of them civilizations, each with a beauty and self-compelling destiny of its own. And why should it be that whenever men have looked for something solid on which to found their lives, they have chosen not the facts in which the world abounds, but the myths of an immemorial imagination, preferring even to make life a hell for themselves and their neighbors, in the name of some violent god, to accepting gracefully the bounty the world affords? Are the modern civilizations to remain spiritually locked from each other in their local notions of the sense of the general tradition? Or can we not now break through to some more profoundly based point and counterpoint of human understanding? For it is a fact that the myths of our several cultures work upon us, whether consciously or unconsciously, as energy-releasing, life-motivating, and directing agents, so that even though our rational minds may be in agreement, the myths by which we are living, or by which our fathers lived, can be driving us, at that very moment, diametrically apart. No one, as far as I know, has yet tried to compose into a single picture the new perspectives that have been opened in the fields of comparative symbolism, religion, mythology, and philosophy by the scholarship of recent years. The richly rewarded archaeological researches of the past few decades, astonishing clarifications, simplifications, and coordinations achieved by intensive studies in the spheres of philology, ethnology, philosophy, art history, folklore, and religion, fresh insights in psychological research, and the many priceless contributions to our science by the scholars, monks, and literary men of Asia, have combined to suggest a new image of the fundamental unity of the spiritual history of mankind. Without straining beyond the treasures of evidence already on hand in these widely scattered departments of our subject, therefore, but simply gathering from them the membra disjuncta of a unitary mythological science, I attempt in the following pages the first sketch of a natural history of the gods and heroes, such as in its final form should include in its purview all divine beings, as zoology includes all animals and botany all plants, not regarding any as sacrosanct or beyond its scientific domain. For as in the visible world of the vegetable and animal kingdoms, so also in the visionary world of the gods, there has been a history, an evolution, a series of mutations, governed by laws, and to show forth such laws is the proper aim of science. 2. The Well of the Past. Very deep, wrote Thomas Mann at the opening of his mythologically conceived tetralogy, Joseph and His Brothers, is the well of the past. Should we not call it bottomless? And he then observed, the deeper we sound, the further down into the lower world of the past we probe and press, the more do we find that the earliest foundations of humanity, its history and culture, reveal themselves unfathomable. Our initial task must be to ask if this be true. And to this end, we shall explore first the psychological aspect of the question, to learn whether in the human psychosomatic system, there have been found any structures or dynamic tendencies to which the origins of myth and ritual might be referred, and to turn only then to the archaeological and ethnological evidences, to learn what the earliest discoverable patterns of mythological ideation may have been. However, as Mann has already warned concerning the foundations for which we are seeking, no matter to what hazardous lengths we let out our line, they still withdraw, again and further into the depths. For beneath the first depth, namely that of the earliest civilizations, which are but the foreground of the long backward reach of the prehistory of our race, there rest the centuries, millenniums, indeed the centuries of millenniums of primitive man, the mighty hunter, the more primitive root and bug collector, back for more than 500,000 years. And there is a third depth, even deeper and darker, below that, below the ultimate horizon of humanity. For we shall find the ritual dance among the birds, the fish, the apes, and the bees. And it therefore has to be asked, whether man, like those other members of the kingdom, does not possess any innate tendencies to respond in strictly patterned racial ways to certain signals flashed by his environment and his own kind. The concept of a natural science of the gods, matching the compass of the materials already classified in the pertinent scientific files, must therefore include in its ken the primitive and prehistoric as well as recent strata of human experience, and not merely summarily and sketchily as a kind of protasis to the main subject. For the roots of civilization are deep. Our cities do not rest like stones upon the surface. The first rich, great, and terrible chapter in the textbook of this subject will have to be developed no less fully than the second, third, and fourth, and its range will be immensely greater than theirs, for it will extend into the dark backward and abysm of time. That is the racial counterpart of that psychological unconscious which has been recently exposed sensationally within the individual. Fathoming the grottos of the Cro-Magnon artist wizards of the Great Hunt, deeper still, the dens of the crouching cannibals of the glacial ages, lapping the brains of their neighbors, raw from cracked skulls, and still beyond, examining the enigmatic chalky skeletal remains of what now would seem to have been chimpanzee-like hunter pygmies on the open plains of the early Transvaal, we shall be finding clues to the deepest secrets not only of the high cultures of both the Orient and the Occident, but also of our own most inward expectations, spontaneous responses, and obsessive fears. The present volume, therefore, explores with what light is available, the deep, very deep well of the past. And like the aim of Bacon's advancement of learning, its intent is to point out what part of knowledge has been already labored and perfected, and what portions left unfinished or entirely neglected. Moreover, where the view is broad and certain distinctive, suggestive landmarks can be descried, occasional guesses are ventured as to indicated implications, but the whole review, rich and colorful though its materials, together with its ventured hypotheses, is necessarily in the way rather of a prospectus than of a definition. For these materials have never before been gathered to a single summation, pointing to a science of the roots of revelation. Furthermore, after this study of the spiritual resources of prehistoric man, I shall, in 3 subsequent volumes, review the forms successively of Oriental mythology, Occidental mythology, and what I propose to call creative mythology, as representing the remaining natural divisions of this subject. For under the rubric Oriental can be readily comprised all the traditions of that broad and various yet essentially unified major province represented by the philosophical myths and mythological philosophies of India, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan, to which can be joined the earlier yet closely related mythological cosmologies of archaic Mesopotamia and Egypt, as well as the later, remoter, yet essentially comparable systems of pre-Columbian Middle America and Peru. And under the rubric Occidental, the progressively ethically oriented mythologies of Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam naturally fall, in relationship and counterplay to the Greco-Roman pantheons and the Celto-Germanic. And finally, as creative mythology, will be considered that most important mythological tradition of the world, which can be said to have its origin with the Greeks, to have come of age in the Renaissance, and to be flourishing today in continuous healthy growth in the works of those artists, poets, and philosophers of the West, for whom the wonder of the world itself, as it is now being analyzed by science, is the ultimate revelation. Moreover, since it is true, as Mann has said, that while in the life of the human race the mythical is an early and primitive way of thought, in the life of the individual it is a late and mature one. An impressive accord will be heard resounding through all the modulations of this subject, from the primitive to the most mature. And we'll stop there for today, and we'll pick it up on section 3, the dialogue of scholarship and romance. Thank you for joining me. Hope you're enjoying Joseph Campbell's Primitive Mythology.